everybody, if you were in the morning session. Hope you've been enjoying the other sessions. And this one in particular is about government sources of funding. So let me just share my screen. And this is only a half an hour long. So if I seem to be going exceptionally fast, then it's just because we don't have as much time as the other hour-long sessions. And immediately after this one will be international student funding. So hopefully, Logan, my screen is showing and I can kick us off in the session.
Yep.
Okay, and so we will take questions at the end of the session. And just to be sure you don't feel like you have to take a bunch of notes, we're going to be recording the session. You'll be able to access it later. And I will also make my slides available to Logan, and all of the links within the slides will be, hopefully we can get them loaded up in PowerPoint so everybody can access the links. So now 'tis the season to start looking for government funds. And if I were to say to take a screen grab of one slide, it's this slide in particular, and it would be the two key resources that you need to keep in mind when you're looking for government funding. That's the Canada.ca website. And in particular, you can navigate your way around from Canada.ca to funding. But if you click on this link down here, it will take you directly to the educational funding section. So you'll find lots of different avenues to get down, but if you click over here, it's going to get you right to the area where you can find information on funding. The other thing that you're going to want to be aware of is your campus financial aid officer. So I'll say this a couple of times throughout the presentation. When you apply for your government student loans or grants, you're going to do it on your provincial loan website. And once you've actually applied, the relationship between you and the government and the loan program shifts over to your campus financial aid officer. So that's why it's really important for students to know where their financial aid office is, or if we're still not allowed to go on campus, how to get in touch with them online. And what I've done in here is I have put links to each of the financial aid websites for these universities. So every single college and university will have one, but in the live links, you'll be able to click over to the best place at these sites. And these are all participating institutions within HigherEdPoints. And you can use HigherEdPoints, if you weren't in the session this morning, you can use HigherEdPoints to fund your, to repay your student loans, if you wish. So you just saw the link over to Ryerson's financial aid page. There you go. This is what it looks like. It talks about OSAP, and you can also visit the site for other financing your education, additional supports for COVID. There were lots of supports for COVID, and then additional information about OSAP. So I'll flip back over now to the presentation. And if you're not subscribing to the Discover section at School Finder Group, there is an update. Logan actually wrote an article on the federal budget and pulled out the elements that were particularly important to students. So you'll see the link here. We'll take you over to that article. There are more grants. They've continued that program, and the federal loan program has taken off any interest that's going to accrue on graduates' loans until I think it was 2023. So that's a great link as well. So here are the basics of government student grants and loans. And this is actually the perfect time of year because you've got enough time to get all of the documentation together to apply for this. And I'll show you an example of the types of things that you're going to need. But here are the basics. When you apply for government student loans, you need to be a Canadian citizen. And when you do, you're applying both for grants, which are free money from the government. You do not have to pay back the grant portion of the money you'll get from the government. And that's been expanded because of COVID. And the second part is the student loan portion. And the student loan portion, they do have to be repaid, and they do start to accrue interest on your loan once you graduate. And the thing that sometimes confuses students is that your student loans and your grants are funded in part by the Canadian federal government. And then there's a second portion that's funded by your province. So in these provinces, BC, Saskatchewan, Ontario, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland and Labrador, you're going to make one application, and that application is going to put your application through the federal portion of the loan as well as the provincial portion of the loan. So you're going to get one lump sum payment from these provinces and the federal government, and you will have to repay. You'll be repaying, making one repayment. These provinces, the difference with Alberta, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, and PEI is that you actually have to apply to the federal portion of the program and then your provincial program as well. And I've got links in the next slide that will take you to each of your provincial loan programs, and it'll be outlined there. But the reason that's important is you might not know that you have to apply in Alberta, both to Student Aid Alberta and to the federal government, and that the repayment rules and timing and interest rates can be different. The Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and Quebec operate their own student loan programs, so they're not integrated with Canada Student Loans, and you'll find their link to their programs. And then in the Yukon, they don't offer, the Yukon itself doesn't offer any student funding. It's just the federal grant and loan program that the Yukon offers. This slide, don't be put off by this slide because it really only applies to you. One of these links will apply to you, and then the 3 bullet points below. So these are the links to your individual province or territory to their student assistance program. So we're in Ontario, and I'll walk us through the Ontario, the OSAP program, just because I'm familiar with it because of HigherEdPoints, and that's my province of residence. But as I mentioned earlier, when you complete your application on your provincial loan site, the relationship that you'll have to have any communication about your application status moves over to your financial aid office at your institution. Once you're actually out of school and you're moving into repayment, your financial aid office on your campus that was my light. They're going to start to communicate with you about repayment. And once you graduate and you're in repayment, your relationship then is going to sit with the National Student Loan Service Center. And that link will take you here. Don't be intimidated, just do the steps right now that you need to do, and it will all be very simple every step along the way. I talked to a student recently who thought that she wasn't able to use her OSAP loan to study outside of Ontario, but you do. You apply in your home province, and then there's a list on each one of these links will say, here's a list of approved schools. So if you do want to take your student loans and study in the US or study in the UK, you are able to do that, but just check to make sure that the school that you want to go to is on the approved list for your province. And they even have a form that says if the school isn't on their list, put in an application to have them added to that list. The one thing I would say is that even if you don't think you're going to need the money and you won't need the loans, I would strongly recommend that you still apply, because in Ontario, and I didn't have time to check the other provinces' rules, you can take the grant portion, which is the free portion, and not accept the loan portion. So you don't actually have to take both, but the grant portion is free money. You might as well take that. And the other reason that it's important to apply and be approved is simply being approved for the provincial and federal student loan program will open other opportunities. And I'll talk about one called Student Access Guarantee. And I know Janet just had her presentation. There are other awards that if they're looking for financial need, the way that they easily measure that is whether you've been approved for student aid from the government. So don't turn it down. There's actually one student I came across, one student in over a decade who said what she does is she takes the grant portion and she uses that for living expenses. Then she'll put the loan into a separate bank account that isn't attached to her day-to-day banking. If she needs the loan, she'll tap into it and use it, and then she'll work enough hours to repay the loan so that at the end of her study period, she can repay the full loan portion. But it's easier for her to tap into that loan because there's no interest accruing on it than it would be, say, to get a line of credit and have that interest accruing. So that was, I thought, a clever way to manage that. So I'll quickly go in now to the OSAP program. And the reason I'm using OSAP, as I say, is that HigherEdPoints, it was one of the first student loan programs that could be used. So I know a little bit more about OSAP than the other provinces. But this is what you're going to find at your provincial loan link. And everything you need is, I would recommend that you bookmark your province's loan site. Everything you need is at this page. So you can see there's contacts here, the resources, the approved schools for Ontario is listed here, the forms, all of the definitions. This here, an OSAP 8 estimator, you can go in and put in your information now, and it will spit out a figure for how much they think you're going to get in a grant and a loan. So you can figure that out before you apply as well. The other thing that is interesting now with OSAP, and I didn't check to see if this is the same in other provinces and territories, before you actually do your OSAP application, they're trying to create some financial literacy skills with the application. So you have to do this information module before you get into the actual OSAP application. So that might take you a little bit longer. So it's a good thing to get started on that sooner. In terms of eligibility, the OSAP, and in Ontario, as I mentioned, the only thing you need to worry about is OSAP. OSAP will have a package of the federal funding as well as the provincial funding. So you just need to worry about OSAP. They take care of that integration. So Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or protected persons. And this piece about who is not eligible is important, because you have to be careful when you take a student loan not to default on that loan. I have heard of cases of students in undergrad who just couldn't make the repayments, and then they go back to grad school and they get locked out of government loans because they've defaulted on their student loan. There are remedies that you can put into place. You can repay that loan, but if you're in a hurry to get funding for your next batch of courses, it's important not to default on it. And then there's other limitations as well. And the cool thing about something I read last week about OSAP is you can actually use OSAP to fund micro-credentials. So if you're a parent or an educator attending today, you could actually use OSAP funding to help you take those mini credentials and courses that are being offered now a lot of places, which is innovative. So this mess of a slide is actually just a screen grab from the how to apply pages here. And it's a nice visual of walking through the process for you. So you need to register, then you need to have your social insurance number to set up your account. You can apply. It says it takes less than 15 minutes, but this piece is really important. So check this out before you sit down to do all of your application. You have to have info about the school that you've applied to and the program, because if you're taking arts at Queen's, for example, versus engineering or commerce at Queen's, the cost of the tuition is vastly different. And so that goes into the calculation of how much funding you're going to get. You need to have your parents or your spouse, if you're married, SIN number, if applicable, and then your tax information. And the one thing, someone who was on a call with me about another ways to pay event said is, get your taxes done. It's tax time now. Do your taxes and make sure that your parents' taxes are done, because that tax information is needed for you to complete your application. And you don't want to be scrambling at the last minute in July or August getting this stuff in. So OSAP applications are open now. I checked Alberta, it's open. I believe most of the provincial applications should be open around now, and you can start that process. So then the rest of the information you can check out in the process. But as you can see, it does take a bit of time. So just like your scholarship work when you're applying for government funding, give yourself a little bit of time to get everything together. Other important tidbits, the student access guarantee that I mentioned earlier. In Ontario, when your eligible amount of OSAP is calculated, there's a requirement at the post-secondary institutions to compare the amount of funding that you got with your personal situation and your program costs. So this is why it's important to apply. If you think you're not going to get enough, but you're approved, take what you can get, because in the fall of your program, they're going to look at how much you were given, and you might actually get a bump in bursaries, or you might get more scholarships, or you might get more funding. And then your financial aid office, if you don't know yet, if you haven't made your decision where you want to go, there's a great list of the financial aid offices that you can find at the OSAP site. And the one thing, just like in the conversations about applying for scholarships, There are people making decisions on this kind of stuff. I mean, yes, there's back-end systems that sort of spit out information based on your data inputs. But if you feel you've got a family situation that isn't reflected in the application, you can actually have your financial aid officer on campus. This is why it's important to get in touch with them. You can have them review your application. If you have, there are lots of families that have, more than a couple of kids, and they're, they need to, their income may look great, but they live in a big metropolitan location and they're not going to help you with your funding. That's something that you can talk to the financial aid officer about, requesting a funding review, and you can ask for an appeal and get an increase in the financial aid that you get. And that's something that students will often find out after the fact. So keep this in mind if you do find yourself in financial difficulty when you're getting there. The repayment piece, a lot of students feel like, oh, I don't need to worry about this because, it's going to be, if I'm not in school now, it's going to be 4 years after I graduate. But keep in mind on the loan portion that you do have to repay that loan. And on this page, there's a whole bunch of really great information about repaying. And I'll show you in a second, there's a repayment calculator. But on this side as well, HigherEdPoints is listed on the OSAP and the Canada Student Loan website as a repayment method. We actually need to ask them to update this because they put this here when we just had Aeroplan on board, but we now have TD and Amex and CIBC as well. So this repayment calculator is really amazing, and it's very sobering when you put in the average amount of debt, $28,000 that you may come out of school with. You can put the total amount of debt in there. You can decide how many months you want to take to repay. So the average is about 114 months or 9.5 years. So when you graduate, HigherEdPoints, we had a 50-year-old repaying student loans, so lots of 30 and 40-year-olds. But you can actually put in this calculation. It'll tell you how much your monthly payment is, and you can actually figure out how much interest you're going to save. By paying a little bit more. So $50 a month more is going to get you out from that loan a lot faster. And we did a calculation for a student who started repaying their loan while they were still in school. You don't have to wait till you graduate to repay your loan. And so we have parents using HigherEdPoints to start repaying their children's loans while they're still in school. And for every $250 you pay before you get into the repayment and the interest accruing point, you can save about $130 over that 9.5 years of interest. So I think the calculation that we did added up to the cost of a car if you paid it off, faster than the full 9.5 years. If you are in trouble, and a lot of students this year who are graduating can't find jobs that are paying them enough money, the government recognizes this. And so you can get into repayment assistance with your loan. And again, it will depend on your family income, your family size, how much of your loan you have. And the link that I showed you to the School Finder article from the federal government, there's new regulations on the amount of money that you need to be making to start repaying. I think they've upped it from $25,000 on the federal portion of your loan to $40,000. So you won't be required to make those repayments. And they've also extended the period of time that interest won't accrue. So again, the faster you can start paying down your loans when you graduate, the less interest you're going to pay. They also have, if you want to do an apprenticeship or you want to go into the trades, they have special grants and loans for apprentice programs. And you can find these other services that are, or these other areas of study that are funded at this link. Indigenous learners, there's more money out there than ever for Indigenous learners. Anybody that's going into the Canadian forces, there's a way to keep your loan interest free. There's even, this is new, I didn't realize there was now aid for athletes, so high performance athletes who are going to be preparing for international competition. So this is a great link to keep in mind if you fall under any of these categories or you're interested in checking out the trades. They do have a special site for COVID supports for students, and it gets updated every time there's something new for COVID supports. And then this link, because work is such a critical part of the funding equation for post-secondary, this link will take you over to a place on the canada.ca website where you can find student work placements as well. So that's the rapid fire. We're at 3:20. We've got some time now for some questions. If there were questions, Logan, that came in while I was presenting, happy to answer those. But what I'm going to do while I'm answering questions, I'm going to take you back to that first page. If you wanted to go and Google the two places to go, the Canada.ca website and then the Campus Financial Aid. So Logan, if you have any questions for me, I'm ready and able to take them.
We do have quite a few before we jump into it, because we only have, under 10 minutes. How can students sort of follow up with you after this, the booth or Twitter or anything else? What do you recommend?
So right after this, I'm doing the international student funding. So I'll stay on in the sessions until then. But if you go into the HigherEdPoints booth, I'll answer every question that gets posted in the booth. They sit there even if I'm not there. And then actually, you know what I'll do while we're doing this then is I'll take you down to the last page, which is our Get in Touch page. So fire away.
Yeah, so to as many as possible, and just in the order that they've come in. So are permanent residents eligible for student loans, or is it just citizens?
I believe that it's Canadian citizens. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will look up as we're talking. What I just read was just Canadian citizens, but there are protected persons. So Canadian citizens, yes, permanent residents. Yep.
Okay, great. Are there types of grants available for Canadians who are studying abroad outside of Canada?
Yes. So I'm not sure which slide was number 8. Someone asked me to show slide number 8. In each province, there's a list of eligible schools. And for OSAP in particular, there's a really long list of schools that you can go and use your OSAP for. And the reason that they have to have an eligible school is they deposit the OSAP into your student account at the school. So yes, there are on that list. And if your school isn't on the list, then they will, you can put in an application to have them considered on the list. So I'm not sure which slide was number 8. I can't see my slide numbers.
The slide before the repayment calculator, it says, if that helps. Yeah, I guess this one. Okay, we've got a few more minutes, a lot more questions. Can you apply for OSAP and take only the grant part and forget about the loan part?
Yes, you can. Yep. And that's a really smart thing to do because it means that you will be on that list of eligible for campus work study programs. So when you get on campus, sometimes it's the financial aid department, sometimes it's the career center, have a list of all of those great on-campus jobs that you can work around your study schedule. And the people that are first in line for those are the people who've been accepted for the student loan programs.
Great. Do loans need to be repaid 6 months after graduating?
You need to start making payments, yes, and unless you go back into study. So on this page, who needs to start repaying and when you need to start repaying is on this OSAP page or your different provincial web page. It'll tell you when you have to start repaying. Now the exceptions are if you apply for repayment assistance, they may actually give you an extension on repayment. And with the federal portion of your loan, if you're making under $40,000 a year, then you don't have to start making payments until you get there. And I think, Logan, your article also said you can't be required to pay more than 10% of your income as well. But that's on that link in the article that you wrote.
Absolutely. And that's new with the budget 2021. Okay, I've heard that grant eligibility is based on financial status of parents, especially if you live at home. I live at home and my parents aren't in financial need, but I am because I don't have free university. Am I disqualified because of their money?
The short answer is when you do your application and you put in your parental income and their tax returns, you may only be offered loans, no grants, or you may not be eligible for anything depending on their income. But that's where the appeals process or the reconsideration process comes in. So you can go to your financial aid office on your campus and say, my parents' income, I'm a dependent in the eyes of the government. The government does expect parents to contribute to their kids' funding of education, but my parents are not contributing to my education. And in certain circumstances, When you appeal that, look out for the deadline to do that. You may actually find that you get funding for that.
Cool, thanks. OSAP loans for full-time students are interest-free. If I'm taking co-op, am I still a full-time student?
Yes, if you are in a full-time program, it's your length of study. So during your co-op program, until you graduate, until you complete that portion of your study, you're considered full-time or part-time, whichever the case may be in the program that you're in. And check, that's actually a good point, Logan, because check what your institution constitutes full-time or part-time, because it differs across institutions. Some institutions it's 4 full courses. Some institutions it's 3. So just do check that again. Your financial aid department will be able to tell you that on your campus.
Can you apply for OSAP and equivalent at any time, or is there a prescribed period in which to apply?
There is a deadline, and I think I did see it. I didn't get a chance to go and check. You can apply, you can still apply for this school year, for the spring for school year. But that is a good question that will probably have to be answered at the website. It's more when the application opens that most people are concerned with, because it's this time of year. But sorry, I can't give you an answer right off the top of my head. You can find it at this how to apply and when to apply page.
Right, okay, if a student is a mature student and has earned money in the last year, how likely are they to receive a student loan?
Again, it depends on the calculator. So go and do the calculator. Here it is, the aid estimator. Put that in, and it will ask for your age. And I think they increased it to 26, I believe, to be independent, not a dependent anymore of your parents. And you can put in the amount of money that you've earned, and it will spit out your estimate for what you might get in grants and loans.
Are these grants, loans eligible for international students?
You have to be Canadian citizen or permanent resident to get government funding, and you can use them at the approved institutions internationally. I'm not sure whether the question was studying international or international student coming to Canada.
I think they'll.
Yeah, so no.
Great. If I am taking a gap year starting in 2022, will I still be eligible for a student loan if I'm not in Canada for the next year?
You will be eligible for the when you start your studies, yes. You can apply for OSAP or for Canada student loans at any point in your study period. You don't have to apply right in first year. There are students that find they have enough money for the first couple of years of school, and then circumstances change. Maybe they were living living at home and they had to move. So you can apply at any point of your studies. So just wait to apply until you know which institution you're going to attend and when you're going to begin.
Great. We're just about out of time. We're not going to be able to hit every question. So again, can students who didn't get everything, they should hit the booth, or what should they do if we don't get to their question?
So the first thing I would say is go to canada.ca and check it out. I'm not going to go through all those again. Canada.ca, or go to the link to your provincial student loan program and see if you can find the answer there. And certainly put your questions in the booth. I'll go and answer those after my next session. And then really the best resource for you is your financial aid officer on your campus. They're going to be much more well-versed in all of these questions than I can answer. But happy to do my best in my booth.
Okay, thanks very much, Suzanne. Appreciate your expertise on this.
Thank you.